Ready to start? I think I am. Okay. That is some silly business going on there. Oh my goodness. Okay, I hope everybody's been having a great day. I know I have. The camera got bumped. Is that better? I think that's better. Anyways. So, hi. I hope everybody's been having a good day. I've been having a good day. Tuesday, 2 o'clock, regular. It's the Tuesday 2 o'clock regular streaming. So here we go. Yeah, I've been working on some stuff. So what I got on the screen right now? Pardon me, I was going to sneeze. So what I got up on the screen right now is the page that I'm posting today. I'm not done it yet. And because I started doing it digitally. I've been really having fun doing it digitally. Let me get my big noggin out of the way and I'll show you what I mean. So, yeah, so with the whole drawing all of the details in digitally from our initial doodle has been a fun process for me. For whatever random reason, I started on the far side of the page and I've been working my way across. So that's how things are going now at this point. But I'm feeling it. And yeah, so Corbin is resting on the other side of the room, but thank you very much for your good afternoons to Corbin and I, Linda. Hiya, Linda. Hiya, Tim. So I've got some ideas about today. I think I'll just jump right in it. I've been talking about when laying out one-page ideas. My camera is gunko here again. Get right. There you go. So, I've been talking about some different approaches to ideas that I take. And one of those different approaches, a little better, is that I will sit down with a sketchbook like this, or something similar, and I'll start working out some roughs, some thumbnails, based on whatever the idea I'm having in the moment. And with that, oftentimes what happens is you generate these little ideas, and okay, good. I sort of covered the thing I wanted to do. I wanted to, in this case, let's start with this one. I want to draw all these people dropping out of the sky and all these poor unsuspecting folks down on the ground not having any real idea of that. So as I'm working on that and as I'm laying that drawing in, it lets me explore some possibilities there of how do I go about trying to draw these two different elements together. And so what I found the easiest for me was I drew the people, right, dropping out of the sky in that sort of forced perspective. And then once I'd drawn that in, I sort of let it sit and wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then I started with this notion of the two layers of the scene. And so then I sat down and I started drawing these people loading their van, and somebody's working on their car, and up and down the sidewalk, and there's the open street, there's a sign. And just laid that image in as though, it's unbroken. So the idea is that I just continued the perspective and I just continued laying everything out. So that what's happening up here and what's happening down there are two very different images, but the composition that they make, and this sort of applies to the same thing with sequential applications using words and pictures, but now I've got two different types of narratives going on with two different sets of pictures. Typical afternoon in an urban environment, people dropping out of the sky. And so it works in the same way as words and pictures by having two separate sets of pictures, because when words and pictures go together, they make that new sandwich and they make that new identifiable thing of the sort of tertiary level where you've got the words and pictures fused together makes a more rounder experience. But when you've got two different layers of images that are maybe even discordant from one another, it sort of forces a new context of the narrative. It's not just a city street scene. It's not just people falling out of the sky. And without saying it, your brain presupposes, without me having to say it out loud, your brain presupposes what the combination of those two elements become. And so, as an opening shot of, say, a story of however many pages, having this as the opening scene sort of really sets it up as the precursor image to all kinds of crazy things happening over the next page or pages. So yeah, I'm really happy with this one. And it was just something that I wanted to try because I was thinking about the idea of the two layered images and making up a third story from it. So, always thinking, always thinking and trying different things. So hopefully I'm going to find that magical elixir, and then one day I will draw the one page that brings universal harmony to the entire planet, the entire universe, maybe, just like the legendary Bill and Ted did once. Anyhow, so yeah. So thumbnails help us build up some sort of basic idea about how to go through story notes and try to find those out. Another example that I've used before. I'm going to flip through this sketchbook. So let's see what we got. Let me go back a ways, I think. Yeah, okay, so here's another example, all right? And we're going to get 2 pages over in a second. So this is exploring and drawing images using just tone, trying to figure out the lights and darks on objects and figures and little pieces of composition and things like that. And I can tell you that this sort of exploration started from this here, this singular image, because I was reading an old Micronauts story from the late 70s, maybe 80, Michael Golden is the artist in that. And I think he might have been, for me, the first artist that I recognized had a sense of realism in his work. I think he, for me, might be the first guy that I noticed that everybody's form had volume. And in that application of form and volume, there's, this dimension that's brought to the images and to the characters. And so this is one of these images where, as I was scribbling this, really loose rendition of this Baron Karza character from the Micronauts comic from the 1970s, maybe 1980. That's when it sort of dawned on me, and I thought, I'm going to play using these markers that I just purchased at the time. I'm going to play on this page and just start exploring a little more of that. And that's when we start getting into, here's a overpass and maybe another overpass or something. There's the cars passing under. There's a environment in the background, just trying to learn a little more myself about using tone to illustrate the image. And so part of what was going on there is that around that time, I started just using 2 values, a intermediate. So we've got our white value that's on the page, and then we got our intermediate value that is like a light orange or a light blue in this case. And then there's our darker value, which is a darker blue, which is still a light cyan blue, really, but in comparison to this water-based marker, it's much darker. And a red pen over here, which again looks much darker in relationship to what's going on with the orange. So I'm trying to carve together the image with the orange, thinking about the objects within the environment or the people that are in with the environment, and really charged, like cutting out that more important information using that red. This is an unsuccessful panel to me for what I think I was trying to represent. The big, uh-oh, somebody's breaking out of jail. Boom, everybody's blown up. And here's the guy revealing themselves to be the one that blew them up with his magic hand. That's not enough emotion in that. So in order to give this sense of unknown and dread, I drew this one on the bottom of this page, which zooms right in on the character and, with the hand up and this sort of menacing, drawing him right into the lens, I think has a better emotional response than, him walking up going, I got my hand's on fire, look out. So these two pages are drawn using tone, and then the details are found afterwards. Another example of that here. Never bothered finishing it, but you can see, I think I didn't finish it on purpose though, because I think that by being able to see just the yellow marker before that orange goes in, you can sort of see how we're thinking about the composition. And so you can do some roughs this way, or you can do some roughs this way. And both of those things take you in that direction that you want to go. And yesterday's page that we did from hunting safari, or hunting stuffed animals on safari. That suggestion came from Salty Snacks. Now we're roughing in with line here, but even in the course of roughing with line, there's little moments where you recognize that sometimes the silhouettes have great benefit in defining characters and defining parts of pieces of information in different parts of our panel by using just values, in this case silhouettes. It does something different. There's a sort of transitional difference where it's defining something and yet not having to very rigidly define it. So it's still clear. It's just not as detailed, right? And then as we carry our composition along, I mean, honestly, behind these two characters walking out of the dust, we could have a bit of a silhouetted, representation of this Jeep truck vehicle in there behind them as well, So, yeah, but basically, it's line art. Now, the thing about when we're drawing either way, line art or using tonality, things like that, is that the thing about that is you're still thinking about the overall object, person, composition, like as in the room, or is it under a tree on a sunny day. You're still thinking about all those different aspects of the composition. There's a thing in life drawing, and I was having a really great conversation with somebody at this last month's comic jam about where they were trying to specifically figure out contour drawing, and just a single line that they apply to the page, and they have to move around through drawing this live model. And so, I mean, oftentimes you'll see people, and I'm going to use a stubby pencil here, unless I have a holder to put it in. Probably not. Anyhow, well, we're going to use this anyways. So I've got this black pencil crayon bit here. And so what I'm going to show you is, so if you're drawing from this model, okay, one of these things that you can do, I think I'm in frame? I'm in frame. Is that right? It's okay. Is that, what have I done there? Too far. The other way. Hey, magic beans. So if you've got a gestural figure that's standing there, and so we're going to draw, how about somebody with their arm out? So if you're thinking about the form of the person, you want to think about where the weight lies in the body, right? And then think about how subjectively that the anatomy and everything comes together for said person. So you can look at it from just these shapes, and then you want to think about, well, there's more weight in here. There's going to be weight kicking out in that hip, and on the opposite hip there'll be weight in the back of these legs, because this is where we've got some the muscles being strained here as the person's standing. And so you start by figuring out these parts of the anatomy. You start figuring out your person, and as you're drawing in your person, and here's their arm, and then it extends onto their hip. But this process is one that, again, it sort of presupposes that you have an understanding of the whole of the form. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to identifiably draw this model that's standing in front of you. The contour project that this friend of ours that we were chatting with, so it's a scribble technique. And so what their scribble technique is, they just want you to look at the person and never lift. So you're never going to lift the pencil off the paper. You're just going to try to figure out how to draw the form in this way. And there's benefits to this, right? There's some interesting quality to this. I, however, am not an advocate of it. And the reason that I'm not an advocate of it is that this is entirely contingent on the fact that you have developed some clear understanding of that anatomy in the first place. That you, as you're trying to put this together into your page, that you've got a really solid sense of this figure and where it goes. And then, of course, there's the challenge of, well, how do I keep going into the other parts of the drawing and, keep the pencil from ever being lifted, and have it sort of have this sense of maintaining all the same characteristics that this weight-based gestural drawing is going to give me. Because you're not, as strange as it sounds, if one is to look at this long enough, there's an easy recognition of the fact that this is more rigid than that is. Sometimes it's really much easier to see, especially when people draw when they're drawing a gestural image, and they'll have just this, they're just leaning right into the movement, and they're not worried about the lines that are going outside of the body. And, they're just really staying nice and loose, and they're getting all their lines in, and they're still drawing their character doing what they're doing, but there's this more organic flow to the marks being made. So the contour line, or the drawing with one line without raising it off the surface thing, I'm not a fan of that. And the reason that I'm not a fan of that is that it doesn't work in the same way as understanding just finding those shapes and finding those volumes and finding where the weight is in the body, unless you do it like this. And so if there's a person standing and we just keep replicating the same pose. So now if we've got this person standing and we don't want to lift the pencil off, think about the parts of your process that work. So, okay, so we're going to do single line. Cheated. You lifted the pencil, Chris. I know. So we're gonna look at our single line image. And so if we're going to figure out the parts that, we can move it around, we can find the different aspects of the form this way, and try to figure out how to draw those in some kind of a way. But we don't necessarily have to worry about all of its details. See, this way, I think, works. And the reason that I think that this works is that you still have a sense of this. This single, don't lift your pencil off the surface once way of looking at the form has a similar benefit to that than this does. there's more bending in the lines. There's a more organic shape thing that goes on. You're not quite as rigid as you're trying to hold on to the integrity of the same structure of the model that you're drawing. You're getting it, there's this implication of the movement in the leg. Same here. There's the implication of the movement in the hip. Is it as clearly defined a hip as the other images have been? No, but you're kind of looking at the wire, the stick figure type of method of it. You're looking at it as a wire person, the sort of underlying part where you're going to add all the clay to your sculpture. And I think that some of the benefits that come out of that is that it gives a clearer sense of form in the figure, and at the same time it lets you focus on the structure of it more than it makes you focus on the surface area, and that you're trying to find the structure within it. So this is so I would, if instead of doing don't raise your line, or don't raise your pencil for a single line drawing, in this kind of an application, try it in that kind of an application. Loose gesturals where you're putting the weight down with the side. So that's why in drawing gesturals, I'll draw it not with the tip of the pencil, with the side of the pencil, and I find that how that helps me is that it sort of gives me a more of that ability to put these marks, to put these broad strokes in here, and I can still, you lay it down flat, you're getting this. You press at one end, you're getting this, these darker lines in the areas that you want them. You want no line, or you want no shade, you just adjust the tip. There's a lot of benefit to that. There's a lot of benefit, but I would encourage these two motions. I was just thinking about this because when you're thinking about things as tone, having an understanding of this first is really beneficial. And the reason that it's so beneficial is now, say, this imagined gestural, imagined a live model that we're working from. And, and I'm just trying to think of it clearly in my head. I'm thinking about what people look like. I'm thinking about how light applies to the surface of people's faces. That there's a shadow under my nose, there's a shadow under my chin. And rather than, relying on an image, like that's just my home screen with the Lori and the kids. What I'm thinking about is the object in and of itself. So if I'm trying to draw this, and I'm going to try to keep it relatively the same scale, so if I'm trying to draw this person, I'm thinking about, by using tone, I'm thinking about those recessed areas. Here we got something in the eye, we got underneath the nose, we've got that shadow that's under the chin, and I'm thinking about these considerations that I've put forward here. What's the structure? What are the shapes, right? And so now I'm, with my understanding of those things, I'm trying to more clearly define the character now. And so as I'm drawing them, and I'm putting them into this composition, I'm going to sit down and apply the values first that are more set into the shadow area. So if we're talking about under the arm, right here, we're talking about underneath the armpit, along the side of and the back of the person. If their hand is sitting here, so I'm doing this top-down shadow application. So if their hand is sitting here and their fingers are like so, then I know that shadow is working over here into the form. And if they've got their hips are over here, and I'm going to think about those areas that are recessed from the light, start drawing those in. And again, just thinking about the form, just thinking about those two different aspects, the shapes, and the structure. So as I'm drawing my person in, and I'm drawing first and foremost with an application that focuses on just how the light hits our person. So now I'm going to go down the leg, and here's their knee, and down below the knee, some shadow, and then we get into, there's the side of the foot. Okay, and so hopefully my scale's holding up. And so then as the second leg follows underneath that shadow, there's our knee over there. Here's the back of the calves as this leg is pushing out into the side of the foot. And so I'm drawing our person in this way, and I'm doing it out of camera like a ding-dong. I'm so sorry. So as I'm drawing our character in this way, looking at it from the perspective of just the the tone of it all, the tone of the form. So I'm thinking, so this character has a sort of feminine aspect to it. So if I draw, I think about how the different parts of the feminine form and how they represent themselves as in accordance to the light. So how that, and there's their stomach coming down. So as I go through and I start picking out the larger shadows, and then I start thinking about more clearly defining some of these other areas. So that's where I'll come through, and I'll take this second value, and this is, well, hold on, I'm sorry, I forgot to finish this arm. So I'll take this second value because I've got some, understanding about, here's this hand sticking through here, and this little shadow in the back of the neck area there, underneath the ear. Okay, so I've got a rough sense of the same figure, but just using that tone. So that's when I come through and I start picking out with that darker value, I start picking out some details and just strengthening the composition that way. Right? And because we've spent some time to try to get an understanding of these two aspects, then ideally that image that we're putting together now is going to more clearly represent the model that we're trying to draw. But it's a very different approach, this, to the other ones that we've talked about, the other ones we've laid out. So there's a number of different ways that we can draw, and there's a number of different ways that we can apply these methods into the things that we're working on, the compositions that we're doing. There's so many different ways that we can look at the same object. And sometimes getting outside of that comfort of how we might typically draw, that comfort zone, and applying different method to the images that we're putting together and trying to learn different things about form. The benefit of that for us is that it's going to give us a more clear overall understanding of how it is that we're going about drawing. It's a different application. It's a different way to apply oneself to doing the same job, doing the same objective job of just trying to do a reproduction of this form, and all these different ways that we can do so. So, just a thought. So I thought I'd do today's one-page story. I'm going to get the book out. I thought we'd start today's story in a similar way to what I've tried to represent here. And which can be interesting. So today's suggestion is a drive-through funeral service. And so this is from Marsh. Thank you, Marsh, for your suggestion. I'll write it down on a piece of papier and take it off. Yes. And so today's suggestion is a drive-through funeral service. And that's from our friend Marsh Makes Comics. So, So there we go. So there's our suggestion for today. So let's see. We want to draw. Let's have somebody come up in a van. How's that sound? And using a van, I'm just going to type in van. We've got vans. Woohoo! Vans. So here's a fun thumbnail right here of a van pulling up somewhere. So let's start with that. Let's see, what am I going to use? Why don't... Have I got some of those chisel tip? I do someplace. I thought I did. Hold on a second. I'm just going to get some of these water-based chisel tip markers. Here we go. I've got some here. Now, I'm going to use one of these to start to... Yeah, we've got a couple of these blue ones. We'll start here. Linda says, today's suggestion is a drive-through funeral service from Marsh. Thank you, Linda. Okay, so I've got this. Now, a drive-through funeral service, and we've got our little thumbnail here to work from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to put together the van picture. And there's a number of different, there's a number of different views that we have here on this same page. I think what I'll do is let's use this one. Let's do that white van. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start, well, why don't I leave that on the screen? How's that? Is that better? Can't really get too much from it, but anyhow, so there we go. And so I'm thinking about these volumes, and I'm finding those, the shadows, the shadow volumes, the areas where there isn't the bright lights on them, you know, and I'm putting those in. So now this is clearly darker than this in the image, but we're just trying to find the form and the composition right now. So, and then when I'm looking at the area around, I'm going to utilize the space around the thing that I'm drawing in order to help more readily define the object in the first place, the thing that we want people looking at, which is this van. So that way, you know, we've got our reader looking at the thing that's important to us, which is the vehicle. And it's just following the shapes, having a, you know, just taking our time to follow the structure and the shapes of that make up our vehicle. Right? If it's not perfect, it's not perfect. Who cares? We're just having fun. It's an exercise we're drawing. So this is a funeral service. A drive-through funeral service is our page for today. So first I'm going to focus on our van itself, and then I'll start looking at some of the area around it. Hi, Susanna, welcome aboard. So, I mean, in the area around, let's just, is there any other vehicles in these images? No. So let's just draw another van behind, who cares? So in the background, we'll put another vehicle, another van. I know, maybe that can fit into our narrative, that there's just a number of people driving up in vans to this place and saying, here's my grandma. Just terrible, but you know. It's a weird idea in the first place, right? The idea of offloading loved ones through a drive-through. There's a silly movie that I really enjoy. It's called Idiocracy. And in Idiocracy, a fella is cryogenically frozen, and when he he wakes up in the future, and it's only like the person that cryogenically froze him was arrested and thrown into prison because he was of a misappropriation of or misuse of American military funds for his program. So the fella is stuck in this cryogenic tube for X amount of time, and it was only supposed to be a month. And so 100 years later, he wakes up, and the whole world has just become really, really silly. Who died? I hope it was an imagination or fun or inspiration. No, of course not. No such animal of those things with me. So he wakes up, and the principal theory here is that less and less are smart people breeding, and because they're like, oh, we don't want to bring kids into this world, and so more and more people that are having kids are less and less engaged in learning and thoughts about future and things like that. So Gatorade has managed to convince the majority of the American public to water their lawns with their product, and fill their toilet bowls with Gatorade instead of water. Like, it's just this fantastic bit of silliness. But the interesting thing about this whole film is that they just sort of pile up coffins and stuff. They don't even have the wherewithal to what to do with people that have passed away. It's kind of brutal, but it's a silly film. Did imagination die? No. Okay, so I'm grabbing a pen, and that's too dark. That's lighter than what do we got? Here's a purple pen. That'll do. So now I've got this put into place, and I'll zoom a little bit on this. And I'll just move it down so you can see it a little better here. Get that out of the road. Sorry, bear with me a second here, folks. There we go. So, okay, so here's our composition that we've put together for our first panel. And so the object that I've drawn, this van from this photograph, and as I put it in here, so now I'm going to come in and I'm going to pick out those details now. So those pieces of information that are going to tie it a little closer together is what our next objective is. And so we don't have to go over everything at first. We get to pick and choose that, of course. But we just want to get that structure applied. So rather than drawing the hood in, because we know there's a discoloration of the hood is a different tone than the body of the vehicle because the light source is coming from this way. So, did you know Linda in Portuguese means pretty? So, hi, beautiful Linda. Aw, Susanna. It's very nice of you. So now I'm drawing in these other details, these other shapes, and thinking about how some of these tie together. But I can put in additional details now, like the lights. And it's not to say that we're out in left field here where we don't get to make adjustments on our image. We can come in with some kind of white, pen or paint marker or something like that, and start applying little bits of value throughout the composition that way as well. So here's us roughing in the vehicle and getting in some of these, just a little bit more detail as we go through the overall composition. Is it perfect? No, but it's a fun way to apply the drawing process, because when you're carving the whole thing in with that flat value, it encourages you to think about not the lines you're putting down, but the shape of things within a composition. The photo that we use, this, it has no clear background other than looks like a wall and a building. So us adding a secondary van behind and thinking about maybe houses across the street, that's, you're already just putting together shapes and just extending, just allowing that part of your brain to extend your image, your usage of this chisel tool to create buildings on the other side of the street. There's a tree. Is it a clearly representable tree? Well, not yet, but we're finding the tree in our image. So it's still a rather sketchy approach, but I like it. I find personally that it helps me in looking at things beyond just the object itself to be illustrated, but it sort of changes me from thinking about it as a drawing. This is actually a method that is generally a really good way to apply if you're drawing your painting, if you're working on a painting and you're drawing in the composition with your brush. Using this chisel method would be a way to do that. So just taking a nice chisel tip brush with a flat head on it, and cutting these shapes in here, just cutting together the fields in your composition, because it helps you to have an understanding of how the light works on things. It helps you to have an understanding of how the volume of these things within this allocated space works. There's a whole bunch of different benefits that you're going to get from this application. And it's not to say you're locked hard and fast in the chisel marks that you've put down. You can do some fun things like leaving out areas and letting the chisel value come through in these areas that you had pre-positioned as being a dark part of the composition. You can add some interesting details and shapes in this way. So here's the cab of our car now, and it doesn't exactly follow the chisel shapes that we put down. We can have a bit of form for somebody in here now. So now there's a driver for the van. Little bits along the way that take the initial drawing that we started to lay out in this very loose method of just two values, and now we're building it up. So that's just another approach to how to put together your composition. That I find that the looseness of it is because you can't draw rigidly all the time, and so if you can find little alternative methods to approach your images, give them a go. See what they inform you. See what they do to help you in your illustration. Hi, Robert. How you doing, sir? Welcome aboard. So I got to turn this a little bit just to get this top of the van in there. Okay, so we've got, lighten that back up. So we've got this starting to come in now. I'm still picking and choosing at some of the marks that are within the initial sketched image. Picking out those dark areas, but also leaving these halfway values still peeking through. So now we've got the shoulder of somebody in the side of a head, just like we've applied this silhouette of somebody over here behind the wheel. Even though we've cut this line to define that this is inside the window away from the hood, that dark initial value that we put down there, there we go. That's where it starts really turning into that intermediate. Robert says, purchased an iPad Pro today. Got rid of my last one a few years ago to force myself to draw on paper more. But my productivity went way down. I got an X Pen desktop last year, but they're tough to draw on. Anyways, cheers. Let's make comics. Linda says, very good. Your production will be back up again. Well, you've got to find comfort in however you're approaching the things that you want to do. And, trying different things is great. But sometimes those experiments don't entirely work out the way that we might have initially thought this is where it's going to go. So, yeah, there's nothing. It's whatever the individual can do. Can you imagine if, here's one thing, you're working in your office job and you got to fill out the TPPX forms in order to have this thing happen. So make sure you file your TPPX. Watch the movie Office Space, a fantastic film. Actually, it's by the same guy that did Idiocracy. Anyhow, so you're not. There's no hard fast rules in creativity that say everybody has to use these specific tools. There's the great varying ways that we pick and choose the things that we want to use in order to create whatever it is that we're working on. So, see, I've got the digital page that is up on the title card, this one, from the initial sketch that I did. I'm enjoying finishing this all. So here's the rough stuff on the left side, and then there's the finished stuff, more finished drawing on the right side, and I'm enjoying that process. I got it roughed out, and I just put a new layer on top, and doodly ding dong doodle. So, yeah, this works for me, having the PC with the drawing tablet, the 12x18 drawing tablet, but I've never tried an iPad, and there's a part of me that just, first off, the single button thing baffles me. I just, how do you make this go? But I've just never tried an iPad, and there's this part of me that worries that if I sit down with one of these digital drawing tablets, there's what's that going to mean? Am I going to I've got a lot of stuff in my studio to utilize. If I use this drawing tablet and I get, this is the way of the future, and then I've got all this drawing material and mark making tools in here that are going asunder, I'll be really disappointed in myself. It's not the only reason to not try an iPad, but it's something that keeps me from stepping forward, that's for sure. I give it a go at some point. I'm also incredibly cheap, which is why I'll, buy art materials at a dollar store and things like that. Robert says, they are amazing. Right on. I can't commit to it. I can't do it. What if they take over my whole life? What if I never touch a pencil again and all the pencil companies go out of business? At some point, there's a benefit for me to just have that. Like if, say, we're traveling or something like that, it's a lot easier to carry a doodly-doo to draw on than it is to lug X amount of papers and so forth. But we'll see. Maybe at some point in time. But I always, when I hear people go, I like this device, I'm like, that's... Every time there's this part of me that's like, should I try it? I want to be like the cool kid. No, it's not. Nothing to do with that. It's just me being silly. So, I'm always trying to find different ways that I can advocate people approaching composition and people approaching finding different ways to get your ideas down. on well, a device or on paper or whatever it is. And so sometimes these random solutions, like, well, we're going to draw with one value, put the composition together that way, and then we're going to apply this darker value and cut out all of the actual marks that we want to. Oh, Linda says your production will be back up again. To Robert, that's great. There's a good story theme. Some kid that was eaten by a tablet. Tablets, dangerous objects. I'll write it down in the book. That's a fun one. Thank you for that, Susanna. A kid that was eaten by a tablet. By a tablet. Tablets, dangerous objects. That's fun. So that's in the book. There we go. And that's Susanna. Cool. There, I put it in the book. All right. So I've got these vans coming together as they're waiting in the line to go through the drive-through, the funeral drive-through. So we're just putting our vehicles in here. Okay, so that's fun. Linda says, that's a cool idea. Yeah, I like the idea of just grabbing a tablet and taking it with me and just pull it out, pen, blah, 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 And the lovely thing about that is, especially in cases where you're doing preparatory drawings and then doing the inking, the thing about drawing on a tablet is that you're basically inking as you're drawing. I mean, you can do different layers and clean it up and etc. But in theory, right? Okay, so we've got our vans in the foreground, right, from our reference image. Well, we don't have reference images for the background, so let's get rid of that and start picking out some of these details in the random shapes and houses and buildings that we put in our background. So let's start here with the overhangs at the front of these houses and think about this direct light that's coming together. And ideally I'm going to be pulling, there'll be a lot more white in the front of this building, but I think what I'll end up doing is that I'm going to be pulling some of this color back out by using a white paint marker or something similar. So we'll put some pretty basic shapes down together here, and then we're going to play around the side of the house here as well. So what I'm going to do before I draw on the side of the house, though, is that I'm thinking about the tree before that, and we want this composition to have some sense of depth. So instead of having the tree drawn behind the house or beside the house but no foliage overlapping, I'm going to draw. So I'm going to come in here, and even though this is a flat value here, and I'm going to add some of these darker tones that's in our tree as though some of these branches are over top of our house as the tree grows up beside it. So there's the end. I'm going to try to get some of the trunk through here as well. So I'm thinking about, so I'm leaving some of these areas out, basically, on the leaves and the branches. So as I'm starting to put this together, now I can come back in to the roof of this house, and I can start putting in this gray tone, but I'm going to leave areas out where we know branches are. So there we go. So now our tree is in front of our house. So it's just thinking about the volume of things, the shape of things. And now we're going to do the same thing with the side of our house, but I'm going to do a bit of silly, sneaky fun. And I'm going to leave some areas out, some little random shapes along the side of this house. We're not clearly defining all the windows, but we're putting some nice little light reflections that are bouncing off of whatever other objects are around. And I'm going to do that same thing with that tree again. Define the objects in there by not drawing them in. So here's the side of our house coming in. So just remember what a house looks like, basically, is the gist of it. I'm just trying to think about these objects. And you've seen them. We know what they look like. It's just a case of closing our eyes and thinking about these things and how light works off the surface of them and where does the shadow go. And if there's a benefit, if you're working on a project and you got to draw a city street or a house or something like that, and you're not sure, you've got a photograph that you're going to use or something like that, but then you've got to draw a couple of different panels with those same places. Well, you're going to have to do something with your photograph to turn some things around so that you can look at some different views or some more close-up images, some of the same objects. But you've got to have an understanding of where that light sits on things, because you want that same representation to be uniform throughout your drawing. So if somebody's looking straight on and then their head turns this way, 3/4 to the side, so we've pivoted that angle. So whereas the light was coming to their face directly here, we know that when the object or the person turns, the light comes here and reveals more of their face. So that's where that having some measure of understanding of the things that that we're trying to put into our compositions and thinking about the shapes of them. Like here's stairs, the front of this house, right? And there's the side of our house. So the stairs, if they're here, let's say I put a bush in front of the house, well, I'm going to draw the side of the bush, but I'm going to try to emulate that stair shape. So now we've got our stairs there without actually having to really, and then I'm going to draw underneath the bush as it comes around, and a couple of bits of shapes, a couple of little pinches of line here. But I don't have to draw the whole of the line. I don't have to draw the whole of the object. But there's our hedgerow in front of the house. And, here's our front lawn. And then there's our driveway at the side. So it's just thinking about the objects and thinking about things in relationship to the space around them. You could be really, crafty and put a deepening value of shadow on the side of the house as it goes back, because it's not in that direct sun. But we're not going to get into all that today. So this is this little residential area that's around our drive-through funeral service. What I'm actually accessing in this moment is here in London. Well, it's creepy story time with Christopher. Are you ready, kids? Hold on. Let me tell you a creepy story about where I live. There was a funeral place, or it was actually a marriage chapel, now that I think about it. There was a marriage chapel that was on, it's a mainline street that takes people from north to south here in London, named Warncliffe. And if you're in a city, there's probably a Warncliffe, in any other Canadian city or British city or anything like that. Warncliffe, Hamilton, Wellington, you get it. So in this little plaza at the end of the plaza, the last unit, somebody had tried to open up a business. It didn't last very long, unfortunately, but it was a drive-through wedding chapel. You can either go in and have a little justice of the peace service for you to, 4 to 8 people maybe, or you can stay in your car and drive around the little plaza and go up to the window, and the priest says, do you like sharing this vehicle with such and such? And do you like sharing this vehicle with such and such? Do you promise to listen to each other and obey the traffic laws and agree to switch who's driving every now and then? I don't know what the person says, but I think it might be along those lines. Maybe not. My point is this. I'm thinking about where that place was in space. And across the street, across the parking area of this plaza is the street, and across the street from this little plaza are these houses, or are these are representational, to the memory of the fact that there were houses across the street. So that's what I'm tapping into as I'm drawing this, taking our picture of our van and actually turning it out into this drive-through wedding chapel, but in this case, for our suggestion, it's a drive-through funeral service, which has its different implications, of course. So this is what I'm trying to think of, is some of these houses that were across this street, and what kind of interesting things can we do with that? Like, how does that inform my memory to make me think about what it is that I'm drawing? So if I know that this is the opposite side of the street here, I can establish that little soft line there. And if I know that this is at the opposite side of this plaza, or there's a whole parking lot for this plaza area through here, so I can do this little soft line to represent that street that divides that side from this side. And it's all contrived, but at the same time, those sort of little reminiscences help us to populate our drawings when we sort of tap into our memory and try to think of these things that, oh, I remember, there was a place over here, and they had, so if this is, here is a representation of a fence that separates this property here from the parking lot of this bank that's now an orthodontist, by the way. But it was a bank at one point. So I'm going to draw the little fenced wall that was up there. And in the background here, I can draw some more of these little elements. So we'll put some shadow from the tree. Okay? And that draws half of our fence in. And then we've got whatever's going on in the backyard of this property. Back in here's, I don't know, some more trees or whatever it is that we decide. I haven't really clearly defined much of anything there. We'll draw we'll do this. We'll draw a little, what's it called? Trampoline. A bouncing apparatus. That's literally what went through my head. Oh my goodness. So, there's a big dollop of ink there. I'm going to try to mist until it dries. Okay, so now we've got our parking lot for our bank here. So I'm going to think about these tall windows. And so I'm trying to think about how light works on these windows. But I'm trying to remember what the bank looks like as I'm drawing it in. And so it's one thing to find a piece of reference that gets us going, gets the engine started. But after a while of trying to getting ourselves to be able to just go back into our head and visualize and try to tap into that memory, and our memory is largely visual, so we should be able to tap into that memory and think about Warncliffe Road and the layout therein. there's this little 45 diagonal window. So, or I'm sorry, it's like the window has, if this is the window, it has these little insets for the glass, and this little diagonal bit of business. Sorry, it's not even in frame. Like so. A little cement, just like its own little kind of ledge. So I think about all that sort of jazz. And it's doable for all of us to do. It's just, it takes time. It takes time, and sometimes we gotta takes a little bit of conscious effort to try to recall things. It's no different from anybody. That was the sound of me trying to get the ink off this brush. Was it me tap dancing? So now I'm putting together the signage for the front of the bank, and I'm not in frame again because my big head's in the way. I apologize. So here I am trying to draw these bank windows and the signage from the bank, the front of the bank. And so as I put window number 3 in here, thinking about that little diagonal, and then we'll do our door. So that door is going to have, because architects tend to like uniformity, so they'll design the door to go down to the ground, but in order to have the same pitch as the windows, they'll have a little window area up above. So there we go. So there's the front, as we're drawing in the front of our little bank here. And one of the things that we can do for ourselves is, as we're drawing, the sidewalk area, etc., as it, moves up to the front of our bank, we can put some lines here for our parking lot. Whatever. Paul says, just got here. What kind of brush is that? I love that type of coloring. Are you talking about the light blue? This is a water-based chisel and marker tip brush, or marker, I'm so sorry. So there's your marker tip at this end, and then there's your chisel tip at this end. And so this is, Paul, I think you've been here for this before, where I'll draw out the composition using a color. Looking for the examples. Should have left it open to them. So all of these things were drawn this way too. And I'll pull the camera back up. There you go. Good camera. So all of these things are drawn the same way, is where I'll come in with this pink chisel tip marker, and I'll draw in all of these volumes and stuff of all these different characters. And then I'll come in this case, with this red pen, and I'll start picking out some more of those details and emphasizing some of those shadows. But as I'm drawing this, I'm thinking about it from the perspective of the image and where the light is coming down within the image, so that I try to have a consistency to those executions. It looks watercolorish, looks markerish. It's a water-based markerish. So, and then that's the same thing that I'll draw these with, right? There's that orange chisel tip. There's this same light blue that I'm using now, but I'm drawing with the cyan blue pen on top of that, and a red pen on top of that. So this time we're using this cyan blue water-based chisel tip, and then we're coming in with this purple ballpoint pen. Come on, you can do it. Silly, silly robot. There we go. Okay, so now we are just going through, and we're picking out these details from a Warncliffe Road here in London, and the fact that somebody tried to open a drive-through wedding chapel, and that memory services the layout of our drive-through funeral service for our suggestion for today's page, coupled with our, where did I put that? I lost it now. Oh no, maybe it was, yeah, there it is. So this is our truck that we're using. And we typed in the word van for our search, and there is our van. So there's our van drawn in, putting in the shadows, and then afterwards we're picking and choosing some details, you know, little things, and then we're adding in our environment. So happy days, fun times. So there's the bank, and then we'll have, of course, second floor windows. All of this is, you get the gist of it. So it's just another approach to drawing, because the method that I tried to show yesterday of drawing where we're actually roughing out all of these panels, you know, and then we're going to have to figure out the light and dark of things, where the shadows are, where the tints, where the shades, the tones are. Shades and tints. That's what I was trying to get to. But this method starts from that opposite side, where we're drawing things with the shades, the tints, and using this tonal range, and then we're adding our line detail. There's benefit to both. This method tends to get you finished first, as opposed to the other method where you've just roughed the whole thing out. Now you got to go back in and put finishing marks to everything. Whereas this way, but this one relies more on having an understanding of the objects themselves. You're wild, Christopher, wild. That's why they call me the burrito. I got nothing. A drive-through funeral sounds like a business in a Quentin Tarantino movie. Hey, blame Marsh. This is a suggestion from Marsh. So for those that come along later than the others, I'm thinking about this business on a street nearby here in London. So in this area here, in order to push scale a little bit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the rear window of a car, and we're going to suggest that here's a car parked in the parking lot of this plaza. And so this just adds a little bit of complexity to our image by having this in this environment. So, just a little something more. Nothing too fancy, nothing too detailed, but just one more thing in order to encourage, that there's some distance between here to here and putting objects in the way. We could also do this where we have, here is a person walking with a stroller, right? And so person with stroller is now giving us a sense of distancing, a distance in our scale. We can do the same thing over here where we've got Mrs. Johnson. Here's another person walking along. And we're just going to draw, trying to find them in there. I'm looking for them in the image. It's like waiting for the stone to tell you what's inside there to carve out. So I'm looking for the white pen that I bought the other day. So this is a Papermate Bright white gel pen. This is the only one I could find after searching at 6 different locations. I don't know what it is. Everybody loves them, a gel pen. So I'm just going to see if this is going to be agreeable. And I'm going to come and I'm going to pull some. I don't know that this is necessarily going to work here. Oh, I think so. I think we're cooking with the gasoline. There we go. We had to just get this thing worked up. Get excited about the prospect of drawing in here. So I'm adding in some, well, more actually taking out some of that intermediate value and applying a little bit of that white in there. So and we'll do it a little bit into this person's body as well. And the baby, my baby. And we can also do the same thing in the house across the street. I don't think this is working well enough. Okay, going to get the Posca. We're getting the Posca out here, folks. Oh, we're into some serious business. This is the sound of me searching through the Poscas because I'm looking in the wrong place. Got it. Okay. I'll try a couple things here. I've got a couple little tools we're going to try. Here's a Faber-Castell. Are you going to work in this? No, not the way I want you to. Get lost. Posca it is. Susanna says, maybe they are dead people looking to have the funeral of their dreams. It's a weird dream to want to have your funeral in a plaza. But I see where you're going with it. All right. Shakety shake, 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 shake. We got any ink coming out of you or paint coming out of you at all? Boy, I am just doing really good today. Okay. I know you work, you cheeky monkey. So now I'm coming in with this white and pulling some things back a tiny bit, and we can come into our lights on our vehicle and put some reflection in there, just little tints. And hair sticking out on that. Same thing over here. Same on our bumper. Just little noodles here and there. There we go. Some of that down there as well. So yeah, I don't know. This is a different way to come at it. Hiya, Liz. Welcome aboard. This is a different way to come at drawing your pages, but it tends to have, and this is the thing I talked about at the start. It tends to be a benefit if you think about the objects that you're drawing, and you look at them as you're thinking about how do I draw objects and how do I consider objects, in the different ways that we can put those drawings together, the different ways that we can imagine. You know, you put them down with gesture lines. This is that single line drawing where I find them to be too rigid, so I prefer to look at single line drawings like this so that you understand the structure of something. This allows you to understand the weight of something and the shapes that make up something that the structure implies, but this tends to define more. And then this is where we stepped into drawing the shadowed areas. Where would the light be the brightest and where would the light be the darkest? And from there, that informs us to go into looking at our image, a source image, like this picture of the van, and then putting it into our environment and starting to more readily define all the different aspects of our environment, so that when we come to, are you going to move? There we go. So that as we come closer to doing the drawing itself in the panel, we know we think about the things that we're putting in, like the trees and the houses and stuff like that. We're thinking about how the light hits stuff and how the light doesn't hit other things, you know, and that sort of lets us have some degree of understanding about where things are the brightest or where things are the darkest, and gives a bit of dimension to the image that we're drawing, because we've considered it as more than just line art. We've considered it as having structure, having, weight, having form, how that can be represented in our image, so that we can make things try to have some sort of dimension to them. Give our composition a little more reality to it, right? So that when we start putting in houses with hedges in front and staircase leading up to the door, and people walking on the sidewalk, and all of those little applications that we make to allowing these forms to stand on their own, just sort of, it allows the reader to not have to work as hard, because of the fact that they understand, oh, this is trucks one line behind the other. I think this is like a parking lot here, and the sidewalk that people are walking by, because there's a car over there, here's a lady with a stroller, here's a dude walking along here. Maybe he's going to his vehicle. So we can push this a little bit by having some divider lines for cars. So maybe this guy over here is going over to where he's parked his car. Whatever the things that we apply in our images, we make these marks, we make these symbolic hashes to represent objects. And the easier that we can make it for the reader to understand what that is, great. I'm going to add a little bit of blue over to here. We'll draw the side of the bank. And, I suppose I could put some more blue back in here for where the light was, but light's not always perfect. So sometimes you get fun little breaks from a cloud overhead or something like that. So there's our bank now. And let's draw this second house. So I didn't put a tree in my original scribblings with the blue water chisel tip marker. So this guy, they don't get a tree. Sorry. Did you guys plant a tree already? So I'm thinking about the roof of the house, and I'm also thinking about the angle of these buildings on the street here. These guys got a little chimney up here at the front. Theirs is probably at the back. So here's the overhang. Let's put that in there. Theirs goes down a little bit farther. So let's consider about the matching of that on the side, this side of the house. And so I've left some white spaces in this, which is much nicer than I did on the opposite side. But let's shake it up a little bit with this house. So let's have their door in the center. Why not? Why is that, Chris? Because I just want to. Yeah. And we'll put a window over here on this side, and we'll put a nice big wide window over here on this side. A bit of a sill going on there. We can put a little sill underneath the windows. A little discoloration in each of the windows there to give them, instead of just having, this or this. That's more interesting, right? Right. So, and then we're going to do the same thing that we did over here. We're going to get cheeky and put in imply that there's a staircase here. But this little mottling, I think there's an E in there, I'm not sure. This makes readily available to us the possibility that this is hedges right here along the side of their property, dividing up them from the neighbors. So let's pursue that as we're starting to define the side of our house. We'll start putting in their hedgerow and some of the shadow cast off of the stairs in the side of the house. We can define the top of said hedgerow this way. And then as we get into drawing the side of the house, we're also using this opportunity to decide the top of the hedgerow. Whee! Yeah. And then we can do the same sort of thing that we did over here, where we've got some windows in place on the side of this house. Maybe we'll just put 2 over here. They've got a different layout. And we'll put some of that shadow from the overhang in there. And we can do let's do a simple fence that goes along the top in the backyard here. And in our space beside the house here is where we'll have these guys' driveway. So there's their driveway that goes up and goes down to the road for the side of this house. And, silly business, but it's the little marks that we make in order to represent the things. And the beauty of this is that if you've seen any kind of street like this, whether this is perfect or not, and I would argue not, your brain is going to fill in the difference. That's the fun thing about how associative our memory is that if we've seen something reminiscent of this, then our brain looks for those signifiers. They look for those identifiable little representations of things. And they are the magical little things inside of our head. They fill in the blanks. They build up. So we'll put the sidewalk in on that side. They build up the recognition of what is this meant to be? Oh, it's a city street. Oh, it's here's some houses. Here's the sidewalk that goes along the front for people to walk along, right? And our memory fills in all of that information. So that when we're looking at a drawing, half of the work is done by us as a reader. But there shouldn't be too much work to have to be done by the reader. It should be, you got to share that. You got to share that responsibility. So here's our bank, our little neighborhood bank going in on the side of the building. We've got enough compositional elements that we could cut a line right here, right in front of our first truck. And there's the side of our panel. And there's enough going on in here that people can figure out what's happening. I mean, we can come in with this marker that we've used. I'm going to use that chisel tip because that chisel tip works well. Excuse me for the bouncing, by the way. I apologize. And we'll put in some little shapes in the background. Now, we don't have to clearly define all of this now because our eyes in the representational aspects of our image, because we have enough association about what's here that we might recognize, our minds will fill in, well, that's the trees in the backyard. You know, there's trees behind all of these places. And yay, you know, that's really helpful for us to draw things to some extent. And then to another extent, we allow the viewer's eye to fill in the remainder. So there's a more clear line there for front of our house. There's ledge above the door, or below the window, above the window. Same with the door. There's some little marks there. Thinking about the shadow from the overhang. So there's our next house, and you know, their driveway will be over here. We've already presupposed the allocation of the driveways to the left of the houses and the bank. So there's our street. This is just a different kind of application to when we're drawing, how we're envisioning all of the details within our drawing, how we're trying to get some degree of representation to the objects within it, so that the reader can go, oh, okay, I get it. I know what that is. That's the front of a house. I get what that is. That's, and the easier that we make that process in how we represent our images. Does it have to be any specific degree of sophistication? Of course not. It's just how can we make it serviceable? If we look at another application of the same thing, okay, and I'll open up the camera a little bit again for this. So if another application of the same image is to sit down, we'll use this. Am I in frame? There we go, we're in frame. So I know that the truck, I think this is easier down below. We'll do that. So I know that the truck shape, there's the window at the front, there's the front of the vehicle, here's where the bumper area is, the wheels are down below, and then there's the space around the truck. That has the same facility for what we're trying to do here. We're just getting a little bit fancy Dan about it. But this has the same facility. And then we'll just draw, here's some house shapes across the street, right? And some trees in the backyard. But how much of this we have to define? It doesn't have to have whatever measure of representation. We just want to allow ourselves the ability to find the image. We know that the tires are there. We know that this is the front window of the car. The van. I forgot to draw in the side window. We'll get that. So there's the side. Excuse me a sec. Okay, so let's chop in that front window as well. So there we go. There's our van. And how much more fancy do we have to be? We really don't. If you get the idea across to the reader that this is the van, okay, and it's in the parking lot for the drive-through, there's our front, and there's our side light, there's our side, and there's our front, and there's our bumper. This is serviceable. This does it. Here's our vehicle. And do we have to draw the stuff that's in the background? No, we really don't. But if this is our frame on our image, just by having some of these shapes in the background, we can just as easily go, well, here's a house, and there's a backyard, and then here's another house, We know there's a backyard and some trees in here, some trees there, and then here's another building, pardon me, in the foreground, and it has some space behind it as well, and there's a street. This is the same, it's the same thing. It doesn't use all the lines. It doesn't have to. This isn't important. This is important. This is our van. So if we can make our van look like a van, we're winning. There we go. Same image. It's the same thing, just a slightly different execution, but both of these have the same level of service to them. It's just a stylistic approach for whatever other bits of information that are in them. So don't get too caught up about how directly we approach our image and the expectation that we presuppose in our image, and expect of ourselves, and how I want it to look like a real some sort of representational image of the actual story. This is serviceable. This does the same job, and it's the same. It does the job of representing, here's a van that's pulling up, and the whole gist of this thing is from the silly nonsense of a drive-through funeral service. All of this investment on whatever level right now is just to allow ourselves, an image with a little bit of space for some dialogue to be spread out and to go over top of some of this illustration, for us to have a conversation about people pulling up in vans and having a funerary service that's right there. And the imagination that we set into this from this point forward, that maybe these vehicles all have a drop door in the back of them, so that the loved one's casket drops through the bottom and into a little existing hole in the driveway, so that after they've been blessed and the body drops down and the cremation process begins, and by the time you've pulled up to the end of the driveway, bing, up comes an urn. And is it a lovely way to do this kind of thing? No. But is it playing on the ideas that we have within here, in our suggestion of where it takes our this drive-through funeral service, and where that takes our imagination? Why not? Is it the nicest thought about doing a funeral for a loved one in this way? Maybe not, but maybe in a world where overpopulation is a problem, and the expediency of life has got to such an extent that we start losing some of the humanity of our existence and our appreciation of our loved ones. Why not? In that world, sure, the rules are different. That's the thing about story, and that's the thing about imagination, is that you yourself are the creator. You yourself are the writer. You are you yourself are the imagination that's being tapped to create this world, to create the meaning that's applied to these stories. You're the one that is going to look at it in whatever way is serviceable for you. You're the one that's going to execute ideas within your story, in the composition, the visual compositions that you put in there, in the text that you outline your story with. And right or wrong is based on whatever the reader's association is by the piece. But you're just pursuing the story. You're just trying to get this down on paper, and to try to allow somebody else to engage with that, and to appreciate it on whatever level, and merely move on to their next story that they're going to partake in. But you yourself can explore this in whatever means that you feel necessary. Maybe the vans pull into a garage, and within the garage is where people unload the casket and do the whole, it's going to be from that point forward, taken care of in whatever ways and means. And they've got a big field in the back, or they've got where they'll go and take care of the burial part of it for you, and this is your place where you say goodbye, and you move on with your day, and the deposition and all that is done later. It doesn't, whatever that is how you explore it. Like, that's how you are going to kick in your the word that I tend to use is your secret sauce. And whatever the level of sophistication of that is, and whatever the direction that you take it, it's not going to be the same as the person beside you. You're not going to draw the van the same. You're going to draw it in a different way, or you're going to draw it using different tools and whatever mechanisms that you can put into place for the process of the drawing. You're going to find benefit in different applications than the next person. The next person is going to find it better for them to lay out the page, breaking it down like this, panel by panel, with a loose structure to each of the images that they're going to build up. And they're going to, or somebody else is going to draw it, with color. Somebody else is going to draw it with a lot of heavy ink application, a lot of gestural work. All of it is in the act of servicing the story. All of it is in the act of doing whatever it is that is most beneficial for you to facilitate you finishing the story that you're trying to tell. So don't get too worried and too hung up about it, and find what's comfortable for you. And over time, this may change to be this, or this may change to be this, and how you go about your process of doing so. Picasso, fantastic facility for drawing very recognizable images and very lovely portraits of individuals who decided to deconstruct that and to try to look at different ways of seeing and different ways of representing individuals within a piece. Guernica has an awful lot of structure in it. The painting of Guernica, look it up. It has 15 different things going on in that piece. And the facility to be able to put so many complex things in the same image comes from having an understanding of the structure of things, and an understanding of how compositional arrangement works, and understanding how light works, and how perspective and scale works. And I've talked before about the elements and principles of design and art, and looking into having an understanding of shape, having an understanding of form, having an understanding of line, having an understanding of value. All of these different things inform us on a subconscious level at a certain point, that they just start becoming the little ticked boxes in the course of our process of visualizing things. And memory is a good one too. I think memory should be included in in these different rules in art. I think memory is an important thing. If you can just allow yourself to close your eyes and think about the objects and how they sit in space, and how they look, and how they shape, and how they represent, and how they feel, and think about what the house across the street looks like. It looks like in the summer, and how it looks like at night. And the more that we can tap into those things and start figuring out ways, and whatever rudimentary means that we can, to hash some marks down onto a surface to create those things, someone's going to look at that and connect to that visually, and someone's going to look at that and have it more clearly understand the story that you're trying to define. So don't get too worried, don't get too worked up about the way that you do it. Allow yourself to play with the process, and allow yourself to find your marks, and to find your means for representing a crazy idea like a drive-through funeral service. It's a great suggestion. It really is. And it can really create all kinds of different Rube Goldberg devices for how you would have the deposition of a loved one come through in a drive-through mechanism. So if anybody else feels that they want to take this one-page suggestion, or a full story suggestion, or just a single panel suggestion, or whatever way and means that you might want to try to represent that, please, I fully encourage you to do so. And this isn't just my baby, it's everybody's. The fact that Marsh suggested it for me in the first place to work from means it's already being shared. So please, anybody that wants to try, finding their own means for representing a drive-through funeral service, please feel free to do so. I highly encourage it. I think that's about it for me today. I'm going to get on to getting some more things done, but thank you everybody for enjoying some time together. Thank you, Marsh, for your suggestion. Thank you, Linda, the moderator with the mostest, and thank you everybody that's come by today. And I hope that applications like this help people. I hope that talking through processes, and finding different ways. I don't know where I put the other picture. Oh, it's on the other side of this. And finding different ways to make marks, to represent things, and to try to find different means, choosing this one today, to try to put together a composition. I hope those things help people. I hope that you find some encouragement and a different approach maybe to taking a silly tool that you find at a dollar store and a silly pen that you found along with it, and using that mechanism as a way to represent the images that you're trying to put down to tell the stories and tell the ideas that you have to express. Okay, that's about it for me. Tomorrow's Wednesday. I will be back tomorrow about 1 o'clock and be doodling something else and talking about something else. But in the meantime, yeah, I hope you go out and tell some stories and create some images and explore yourself and the vehicle of creative expression, and to help you make connections to the world around you. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. Hopefully, in the meantime, bye for now. Go draw something. Have some fun.